Good morning and welcome to the Budgery and Procrastination Department. It is just gone 4:30, which for some inexplicable reason is when I do my best work. So here we are. This is a genuine real-life Ceefax inserter from 1997 or thereabouts. So let's have a look at this thing, although first of all we're going to have a quick history lesson, so over to the InVision Continuity Suite for a bit more information. It may come as a surprise to you that until 1997 there was no such thing as a regional Ceefax service. Rather, the entire service was edited, generated and inserted in London, and it wasn't uncommon, especially in the early days, for you to lose your Ceefax service when your region opted out of network, as they had no ability to bridge data from the incoming network feed from London onto the output of their own Pres suites. However, at the end of 1996, Ceefax got its final rebrand, and sometime between then and the end of 1997, we got regional pages. Not sure exactly how long the gap between the two was, and I'm also not sure why there was a gap, but from the documentation that I've read about these boxes, I suspect that the software wasn't ready in time, and that's why there wasn't regional pages right from the relaunch. These boxes generate the Ceefax service completely from scratch, in that the incoming network feed now served as a reserve and also for any incoming datacast information. Each region had 3 of these boxes, one for BBC One, one for BBC Two, and a reserve unit that carried a sort of hybrid of pages that could in theory be used for either network should the main box fail. These inserter units are essentially full PCs. They run MS-DOS, they have proper hard drives, floppy drives, and a 486 CPU. In fact, something that I think might be interesting to try, and I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't work, is to install Windows 95 on one of these. The inserter units were made by a company called VG Broadcast, who appear to have later been taken over or bought out or something by somebody called Sys Media, and I'm not sure if either of these companies still really exist. Whenever you go into the depths of any broadcast company, it seems to get very messy very quickly with everyone buying out everyone else. But interestingly, visually I'd say these look pretty much exactly like an Advantech industrial PC. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if I peeled that label off on the front that that's what's underneath, but nonetheless. As you can see, the front cover has this nice key on it, and we can open that to reveal, oops, sorry I jolted you there, and we can open that to reveal a floppy drive and the usual power switch, reset and a keyboard lock. And also that on the side is a filter so that you can easily get access to that to change it out. So first of all, let's just power it on and see what happens. Now, whilst it's very tempting to try and log into this machine and produce our own teletext pages on it, I'm not going to do that in this video, at least, for a couple of good reasons. One is I suspect this video is already quite long enough, and the other, well, I need to explain to you how I came about this box in the first place. You see, I was contacted by the Broadcast Engineering Conservation Group, and they had been offered 3 of these units from BBC Norwich. Unfortunately, by the time I got in touch with BBC Norwich, these units had already been sent away for disposal, and the company doing the disposing were very keen not to let them away without having their hard drives wiped, which would of course render them completely useless. Now I managed to come to an agreement with the company and BBC InfoSec and various other rigmaroles, and basically they've left most of the stuff intact, but I can't show you any of the configs or any of the files that are on this system, which is a little bit ridiculous, but there you go, and I have to keep the peace. So yeah, we'll come back to that perhaps in a future video. In the meantime, I think it's time that I did enough waffling around and we took the lid off this. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's the fan that's making that noise, and it sounds rather unhealthy. So yeah, let's have a look. With the lid removed, you can see there's a fair bit of empty space inside this thing, but there are also plenty of interesting cards to look at. The power supply is just a standard ATX power supply, but there's something weird going on with that motherboard. And indeed, it's not a motherboard, it's actually a backplane. What you might normally call a motherboard, as having RAM, CPU, etc. on it, is actually this board, and these cards are the ISA card add-on type things that you might expect to find in a normal PC. But actually, before we go any further, I better show you the back so that you know what connectivity we're dealing with. Now, I do apologise that you're in a bit of wobble cam at the moment, and that's because I couldn't be bothered to rejig the entire tripod just for this shot. So anyway, this is the back panel. You can see where the actual CPU card and stuff is. We have 2 serial ports and a PS2 port. Then there's a video card which produces the output to the monitor that we were looking at earlier. There's a network card which has normal RJ45, but it also has a BNC for thin net probably. This is the actual teletext inserter input and output, although there's something a bit special going on there too, which we'll talk about later on. And finally we have the PDC input, which again I will explain better in a little while. So let's go back to taking these cards. Alright, so the tops of the cards are supported by this bar with these sort of rubber stopper things on it, which I presume is to stop them jiggling about. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will say that this doesn't work when DHL throw them down a flight of stairs. Anyway, let's start by taking the CPU card out. So you can see we have lots of ribbon cables. This one goes to the floppy drive on the front panel. This one goes to the hard drive, which is mounted just in the side here, and I don't know if you can quite see what I'm doing. Let me tilt you down just a little bit more. Yes, this entire front unit is mounted. I mean, you can't see the movement, but yeah, you might just be able to see that that's moving. That whole front unit that the floppy drive and the hard drive are mounted in is mounted on rubber shock mount things, so they can jiggle about a little bit and dampen vibrations. Anyway, this is the IDE ribbon to the hard drive. I suspect... No, there's not. Okay, fair enough. Right, so that's that off. And finally we have the ribbon that goes to the parallel port in the back. So that's that free, and I can just loosen this bad boy, and this should come out. I don't really want to take this out the entire way, but you can see that this is just a really compact little motherboard. This is the actual main CPU here. This is a stick of RAM. This is a fan cable which I have bodged up. Don't ask any questions about that, just accept it. And there is the real-time clock, which of course has run out of battery, because those always do. Let me just zoom you in a bit so you can see a bit more of the detail. Excellent. This is the BIOS chip, of course, and there are a few empty sockets that could probably be used for other EEPROMs and stuff. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking that looks a bit weird, and the reason that this is not standard, because by the time I had received these, the heatsink was clipped on by essentially a bit of plastic which had gone all brittle, and by the time I received these, as I say, having been lumped down the road by DHL, it had fallen to bits. So I have actually stuck the heatsink onto the top with a bit of thermal glue, and then the fan is actually a completely new fan that I added, because again the other one had fallen to bits and seized solid, and probably had been seized solid for years. So that's a replacement blower fan that I stuck in just to keep this thing running nice and smooth. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. Next we have a pretty normal, boring looking video card. Interestingly, I notice it's from 1994, but then again, I mean, there's absolutely no reason this had to be anything special. It literally just had to do a command line from DOS for all its life, so I suppose why would it need to be anything newer than that? Next we have a 3-COM Etherlink card. As you can see, this has all 3 formats on it, and it's missing a chip. To be honest, this is not my area of expertise, so yeah, I'm just showing you because I'm sure there will be someone who will be interested in that. Skipping forward slightly, I've taken out the PDC card because I want to save the actual inserter card to last. The PDC card, basically all it's doing is it's receiving both forms of packet 830. Format 1 packet 830 would give you date and time, service name, things like that, and format 2 is the signal that could remotely control your VCR to tell it to start recording and stuff like that. And it seems, from what I can tell from the documentation and stuff, that this card would use it would pass through both formats to the teletext output, but it could also use the incoming date and time to set its own internal clock. And these are the actual 2 receiver chips. There's also, as you can see, I'm not sure if that's an FPGA or a microcontroller, but it's, you know, I think it's a microcontroller. But anyway, there's basically just a bit of glue logic to attach those 2 chips onto the bus. And that's all that card does. It actually, interestingly, looks like you could have had a whole load of extra inputs, and I'm not entirely sure why you would want that or need that, but I suppose if you had lots of different sources and wanted to bridge them all together or something like that, that may be useful. But anyway, that's the PDC card. And now this is the main event. This is the actual card that would take video in and give you teletext on your output. Now, of course, it seems a bit of a shame that after all the effort that Vega or Sys Media or whoever their name was went to making this card produce a really nice teletext output, that the BBC took the output and fed it straight into a data bridge where it got regenerated on the output. So really all this ever fed was about 2 meters of cable between 2 bays, but nonetheless it's interesting to explore. The first thing you'll spot is that this card has its complete own CPU, boot ROM, and a big stick of RAM. And yeah, it seems that this card is in fact completely standalone. And if we watch the boot sequence, you will see that software is just copying the page data directly onto this card. So it may well be possible to just use this card standalone in something else. That might be something interesting to explore someday. But anyway, the other thing that's interesting is there is this big fancy filter chip thing here. That is the raised cosine filter, because of course a teletext waveform is a raised cosine, not a square wave, because that would be very bad in broadcast. So this is the filter that's giving it that shape. We also have a couple of adjustments here to adjust the amplitude of the waveform, but to be honest with you, a lot of this is somewhat of a mystery to me. I did try a while reverse engineering it, but unfortunately it seems to be a 4 or 6 layer board, so you lose track of where things are very quickly. I will try and come back at some stage and look at this in more detail, but what's really clever about this card is most cards, so if you think of my inserter, which, let me see, we have one right here. This is my inserter compared to the real thing. So interestingly, that card does this entire box, but that's besides the point. What this does is this takes video in, digitizes it, adds teletext to the digital signal, and then converts it back to analog on the output again. So that's very involved, that's quite complicated, but even the MRG systems inserters, like, well, I was going to say like this one here, but of course this is actually a digital one, not an analog one. I don't have an analog one to hand, so you'll just have to believe me on this. They used a video mixer chip to take the input, buffer it, and then add the teletext data on top, and they would essentially switch very quickly between the incoming video signal and the internal data source, and that would be how it would insert stuff onto each line. This one is actually, if you measure continuity between the input and output, these are direct short. There isn't actually any switching going on here. This is actually switching teletext data directly onto the output. It's taking advantage of the fact that a video source is going to have a 75 ohm impedance. So they are actually essentially switching the data lines directly onto the output of this. And that's why there are all these, I mean, a couple of those, that one is a regulator and that one is a regulator, but a lot of these are actually nice transistors and things, and I think that's because they are amplifying the signal to, you know, essentially switch the full video waveform. We have down here is a nice very high slew rate op amp, which may be something to do with that output also, and up here is a clamp, a video clamp, which they are using to obviously clamp black to 0 volts so that the teletext waveform is at the right level relative to whatever you set it at here. But yeah, that is what a real life proper Ceefax inserter card looks like. And if you lived in the BBC, what is it, BBC Norwich region, wherever that is, you probably, and you remember watching Ceefax on BBC Two specifically for this box, it came from this exact card. Well, I was originally going to end the video right there, but it seemed like such a terrible shame for you to not actually see this thing doing what it does best, and that is producing a Ceefax service. And whilst I can't show you the content as such, I can hook it up to the analyzer and let you see the waveform that it outputs. Now interestingly, of course, these things are actually from pretty similar eras. I think the Tektronix is from 1998-ish, which means that the Ceefax box is probably about a year its elder or thereabouts, but they do look really good together, I think you'll have to agree. Anyway, let me just jump in front of the camera and we'll have a look through some of the things that we can see that this is producing. Alright, so again the fan on this has decided to start squeaking as it does, but anyway, we'll ignore that. So if I go into measure and V-blank, we can see that we have 12 lines per field. We also have this really weird thing going on in the line 7. I don't know if you can see that line is flashing on and off, the full width and the full height. Don't know why that's doing that. Is that possibly my test generator? I mean, it seems unlikely, but let's just, if I turn vertical interval off, no, that's definitely still there. So yeah, that's coming from the inserter and I have no idea why it would do that, and that seems like a really stupid thing to have. But also it is interesting that this box leaves line 7 blank, whereas most inserters I think would usually start on line 7. But anyway, so you have 12 lines per field anyway. if we go back to the waveform, you can see that it has certainly done a very nice job of making it all the right level and the right shape. If I do expand and we scroll across, that is the clock run-in and the framing code there, and you can see those are absolutely picture perfect sine waves. Now it is worth noting, of course, that this analyzer does low pass its input signal, so you can be caught out a little bit if you're using something like a very high speed DAC on the output, in that it will smooth the output out a wee bit, as opposed to a newer scope. But that is pure perfection there, I think you'll agree. And I mean, even just look at the flat top of the framing code, like that's again picture perfect. So there's no doubt about it that this produces an absolutely beautiful output. And yeah, so, and I think it's just amazing, and I don't think it's probably appreciated enough with this machine because, as I say, unfortunately I have some restrictions on what exactly I can show you on it. But that is the original hard drive, the original 1996 or 97 hard drive, and I plugged that thing in, and even though I discovered later that the heatsink was missing off the CPU, it booted right up and started producing BBC Two Ceefax frozen in time from 2011 or something like that. And I think that's absolutely amazing, and it's such a shame that I can't show you it, but there you go. This is, InfoSec have decreed that it might be some kind of, you know, issue, so I can't, but there you go. Thus is life, etc. And hopefully in a future video I will be able to copy a few of my own pages on there and we can play around with this a bit more. But that's actually a pretty brilliant thumbnail right there, isn't it? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you would consider subscribing for more rubbish like this in future maybe, and I will see you on the next one.